Many people think that adding a sweetener to the matcha is just about the sweetness. However, there's a lot more to it. Matcha, by adding sweeteners, it can become less harsh, it can be less bitter, and it can really improve the overall taste of the matcha. It'll make it feel like it's a few grades higher when done right. That's why you don't guess with the levels of sweetness. You want to decide with intent. So today, we're going to do some experiments. We're going to compare different levels of sweetness side by side so you can really understand the dynamics behind how the sweetness level affects the matcha. So you can make a right decision on the sweetness level for your cafe so your customers will keep on coming back. Hi, I'm Yuki. I'm the founder of Tealife, and here we break down Japanese tea so you can become a Japanese tea expert. If you're a cafe or a restaurant owner looking to add matcha to your menu or improve your matcha offering, then we're here to help. You can sign up to our free newsletter from down below, and we'll be sharing useful information like this video on a regular basis. You'll also be able to download the 30 most common questions you receive from your customers. You can just pass it to your staff, and from tomorrow, your customer experience will improve. Let's talk about the setup of this experiment. But before we do so, we have to talk about the purpose of the sweetener for a matcha. Now, this entirely depends on the matcha strategy of your cafe. And we'll talk about matcha strategies in a different video in the future. However, for this video, we'll talk about two purposes. One is we want to make sure that we complement a taste of the good quality matcha. So you might have a good quality matcha, you want to make sure that the customers can taste the good quality matcha. However, you also want to reduce its weaknesses by using a little bit of sugar. So that's the first purpose of a sweetener. The second purpose of the sweetener is a little bit different. If you have a low quality matcha with very strong, harsh notes, some unpleasant notes, then you want to reduce the weakness. We want to mask the matcha as much as possible with the sweetener, and also a combination of milk as well. So these are two very different purposes, and that's why for today we're going to do two very different experiments. The first experiment we'll do is we'll make usucha matcha. We'll use good quality matcha, and then we'll try different levels of sugar, and then we'll test how it goes. The second experiment we'll do is we'll take a lower quality matcha, and then we'll make matcha lattes. And then with different levels of sugar, we'll try to see which one coats the weakness of the matcha the most. For the first experiment, we're going to use the sen matcha. This is an entry-level usucha grade matcha. And because it's a usucha grade matcha, it's going to be a good quality matcha. It's going to have its sweetness and umami, and it'll have nice notes. So we want to make sure we can complement that. However, it is an entry grade, so it will have some of the bitterness and it will have some of the harshness as well. So how can we use the sweetener to make sure we can keep the tasty notes, keep the strengths of the matcha while reducing the weakness of the matcha as much as possible? Again, we'll be testing this in usucha form. We'll be taking 2 grams of matcha, 65 milliliters of water each, and then we'll be adding syrup to sweeten the matcha. The syrup we'll be using is this one, Red Man's Premium Syrup. It's something that you can easily find locally if you're in Singapore. If you're not, I'll just read out the ingredients so you can tell what it is. The ingredients is straightforward. It's just glucose, sugar, water, and preservatives. We're going to experiment with 5 different levels of sweetness: 0 grams, 0.5 grams, 1 gram, 1.5 grams, 2 grams. So these are the different sweetness levels we're going to experiment with. Okay, so currently we have 6 different types of bowls here. They all use 2 grams of matcha, and then they all have 10 milliliters of water each. So I'll add the rest of the hot water and then I'll whisk it to make usucha. But currently we're still at the paste phase. And then for each of these, they have different levels of sweeteners. So this is no sweetener, 0.5 grams, 1 gram, 1.5, 2, and 2.5. And I was intending to do 5, but accidentally I made 6. So we'll experiment with these 6 levels of sweeteners here. Okay, I'll start to make the matcha, but obviously because these already have sweeteners inside, I'll use a resin whisk to whisk each of these. Okay, so we put the hot water inside. I'll be whisking each one. I want to rush through this because I want to make sure that I can taste everything in the same temperature. Okay, so we have the 6 samples and we're going to test them one by one. This is the no sugar. Itadakimasu. Yum. This is just a benchmark, so I'm going to try to soak this in. I got the benchmark of the flavors, the umami level, the sweetness level, the astringency level. Okay, zero 0.5, okay? You can't taste the sweetness at zero 0.5. However, it does mask astringency. You feel less of the astringency. There is a slight harshness to this entry-level Usucha grade matcha. As the drink goes down your throat, there's a sense of pulling on the tongue, and that's the harshness. That's a lot lighter when you add the zero 0.5 grams of matcha without noticing that there's any sugar at all. I won't be able to tell that there's sugar inside. So that's zero 0.5. Let's try 1. This is 1 gram. I would say that 1 gram is also hard to tell that there's sugar. Maybe slightly you might be able to sense some sweetness at the really end of the taste, maybe. But otherwise, you won't be able to tell that it's sweetened. It actually further reduces the harshness of the matcha. So if you compare this 1 gram to the 0 grams, you feel that there's almost like a natural sweetness. So not like a sugar sweetness, but almost like a natural umami and sweetness to the matcha with lower levels of astringency and bitterness. So this almost feels like a higher grade matcha compared to the 0 grams or the 0.5 grams. You might, if you're super experienced, you might be able to sense that this is not natural sweetness at the very end. Okay, so let's try, this is 1.5 grams, level 4. It's not like it's sweet, but you can still sense that there is some level of sweetness added. It doesn't feel natural from 1.5 grams. But for sure, it reduces, it masks lots of the astringency. Yeah, the sweetness starts to battle, if you will, with the matcha taste, with the matcha flavors. Move on to 2 grams. This is level 5. Yeah, the sweetness has increased a little bit again. As you feel more of the sweetness, you focus less on the notes of the matcha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Level 6, this is 2.5 grams of sweetener. So it's gradual. I think from 1.5, the sweetness starts to become obvious. And then 1.52 to 2.5, the sweetness gradually increases. And as the sweetness increases, the taste of the matcha itself becomes less of a main thing. Okay, let's summarize. For the usucha, I think we have a pretty good conclusion here. Again, the objective is to make sure that people can taste the quality of this good matcha, but still try to kind of reduce the weaknesses. That's how we want to use the sweeteners in this case. And obviously you don't have to use a sweetener. That's the most, pure form of matcha to provide to the customers, which was this one, the level 0, and which is fine. However, by adding a little bit of sweetener, it still makes it feel like it's not sweetened, and yet it can reduce the harshness and the bitterness of the matcha to a degree that you might feel that it might be 1 grade or 2 grades higher in terms of matcha quality. And the sweet spot for that was either 0.5 grams of sweetener or 1 gram of sweetener to the usucha matcha. I prefer 0.5. I prefer 0.5 because I think this will depend on the sweeteners as well, but the sweetener itself has a taste, and it starts to become a little bit more evident. For the 0.5, it was very hard to tell. You cannot really tell. It just reduces the harshness. For the 1 gram, I think at the end of the taste, you feel this slight scent of the sweetener, not the sweetness of the sweetener. So I personally prefer 0.5. So a very small amount of sweetener does help for the usucha, depending on the grade of the matcha again. From the 1.5 and beyond, the sweetener starts to become too obvious in my view, and then it also starts to clash with the matcha taste itself. So I feel that it's a little bit of a waste. Again, there's dependencies on the quality of the matcha that we use. So again, we're using the Sen matcha, which is an entry-level usucha grade matcha, which does have some sweetness and umami, but also has some astringency. Now, if we're gonna increase the level to like a high level usucha grade matcha or even a koicha level, then I would not use any kind of sweeteners to add, because the level of harshness, the level of bitterness is so low that it's no use in adding sweeteners for that. It might just alter the taste to an unnatural form, and I wouldn't really try to do that. If it's a lower quality matcha, so if it's like a high level culinary grade matcha instead of the Sen matcha, then maybe the harshness is a little bit stronger. And in that case, you might want a little bit more sugar. So maybe it's a 1 gram, maybe it's a 1.5 gram, depending on the level of the culinary grade. So you have to make this adjustment depending on the level of the matcha. But I hope this works as a benchmark, and I hope it gives you a feel for the dynamics of how the sweetener affects the taste of the matcha. Let's move on to the second experiment of the day. And the second experiment is what happens when we use a low quality matcha. So this time around, we're going to use a sambancha organic matcha, which is a low quality matcha. And the key difference here is that because it's a low quality, we have to change the matcha strategy. Remember previously, what we did was we took a good quality matcha and we wanted to use sugar to complement the taste of the matcha. This time around, it's going to be a little bit different because it's low quality. It's going to have more nastier tastes. It's more going to be about how can we compensate for the low quality matcha. So a very different approach in terms of what we use the sugar for. For a low quality matcha like this, you wouldn't really generally serve it as a pure matcha. So you wouldn't do usucha, you wouldn't do Americano without sugar. You would generally mix it with milk and sugar and try to mask it as much as possible. So for this experiment, we'll be experiment based on a matcha latte formula instead of a usucha formula. Let's talk about the setup a little bit. We'll be, again, for the matcha, we'll be using the sambancha. And I have the sambancha here for you. You can see that. So as you can see, I think our matcha is here, so give me a sec. Let's go back to showing you the matcha again. This is the sambancha organic matcha. And as you can see, the color is a yellow-greenish color. It's very pale. It doesn't have the vibrancy that you would want in a quality matcha. So it's very different from the previous matcha that we used, but that's what you expect from sambancha. So again, sambancha is third flush matcha. It's not the first flush or the second flush. And third flush means that it's from the third harvesting season of the year. And by the time it's the third harvesting season, all the nutrients and compounds have drained out of the leaves. So you won't have the sweetness, you won't have the umami, you won't have lots of the notes, the vegetable notes. Those will all be drained. So we won't be expecting a really high quality matcha for sambancha. On top of that, this is an organic matcha. Now, organic is obviously a good thing for the body, but from an agricultural perspective, it's actually very challenging. So if you take two matchas at the same price point, one being organic and one being non-organic, the non-organic will probably be about 2 grades higher in terms of taste compared to the organic. So this matcha in particular, it's challenged for several reasons. Again, it's a sambancha, and on top of that, it's an organic. So we're not expecting a very good tasting matcha from this one. The idea of this experiment is, let's see how much sugar we need to really mask some of these weaknesses so it can be a tolerant level tasting matcha latte. For the setup of this experiment, we'll be using 2 grams of matcha each, and then 40 milliliters of milk. And then on top of that, we'll try the different levels of sweetness. The first level will be 0, so we'll try to see how it would taste without any sweetness. And then we'll try 1 gram, 2 gram, 3 grams, 4 grams. So in total, five levels of sweetness. Okay, let's jump into the experiment. Right now I'm taking the time to mix the matcha with water. And at this point you can kind of see the watercolor. It's kind of a brownish green. I hope you can see it. So it's not exactly appetizing. It really isn't. This is one of the things that's very difficult to mask with just sweeteners. So the color will be a giveaway in terms of the quality of the matcha, unfortunately. And at the same time, the smell is not that pleasant either. I'm not sure how I can explain the smell, but this is what people, I think, when people say the matcha smells fishy, I think this is what people are talking about. Yeah, there is a kind of a fishy smell, which the people who don't like matcha, who's had bad matcha experiences, I think that's what they talk about, the fishy smell of the matcha. This is exactly what it is. So this fishy smell, these notes, hopefully we can reduce with the sugar that we add. Okay, so here we have the 5 levels of matcha lattes. This is no sugar, 1 gram, 2 gram, 3 gram, 4 grams for each cup. 2 grams of matcha and 40 milliliters of regular milk. Let's see how they taste. All right, here we go. Level 1 is 0 grams of sugar. I don't think you can smell the fishiness anymore because of the milk. Disgusting. Super stringent. You can get the fishiness in the taste as well. Okay, so that was the baseline. Now again, there was no sugar. So no wonder why you need sugar, right? So the milk alone doesn't really mask it well enough. I'm not sure if this formulation was too strong. The matcha is very strong. Okay, this is level 2, 1 gram of sugar. Okay, the sweetness is not strong, but it does a whole lot of helping in terms of reducing the stringency, the harshness. Does not completely mask the fishiness of the matcha, but it reduces a lot. So compared to the 0 grams of sugar, the very sharp astringency has significantly reduced, although it is still there. You can feel a very strong astringency, and that's very tough to drink. So I wouldn't say this is a pleasant drink. I think the fishy notes, it's significantly reduced as well, but it's still there. So this is still, I would categorize this under a disgusting-ish drink. Okay, let's move on to level 3, which is 2 grams of sugar. So 2 grams of sugar, it starts to get pretty sweet, is my guess. Actually, no. The sweetness is still moderate. Yeah, so the fishy notes are still there. But the astringency has significantly reduced, even further than level 2. I don't have to twist my face that much to drink, but the aftertaste is just bad. Yeah. So it does help, but 2 grams is not enough. And the sweetness level it's not that high. It doesn't feel that high either, although it's 2 grams in there. Let's try level 4. This is 3 grams of sugar, 3 grams of sweeteners. Okay. Okay, so now you start to taste the sweetness of the sugar. It doesn't actually feel that sweet, although it is 3 grams of sugar. I think it's because it cancels out the astringency. And from here, I feel that it's a drink that you can tolerate. The level of astringency you can tolerate. I actually feel that I'm okay with this level of stringency if you're drinking a matcha latte, because or else you wouldn't really be able to tell that it's a matcha latte. I think the issue is that there's still some of the fishy notes. Um, Not necessarily the aftertaste, but overall, it's lingering. So this is the part that people might think, it's not for me. Let's go to level 5. This is 4 grams of sweetener. So I expect the sweetness to stand out. Even at 4 grams, it's not overwhelmingly sweet. I think again, it still cancels with the matcha taste. So from a taste perspective, forget health, right? But because this is a lot of sweetness or sugar, let's throw health out of the window, and we just compare the taste. I feel the more the sweetness, the more it masks the nasty notes. So I think what this is, it still has the stringency, so it still feels like matcha, but it's slightly compared to the level 4. It takes another small step towards reducing the nastier notes of this matcha, so it tastes less fishy, but it's still fishy. So as a conclusion, this is very difficult. It feels like the more the sugar, the better. But ultimately, you can't really mask the smell. Two things you can't do. You can't really change the color of the matcha because the color is, it's a green, brownish tint, which doesn't look really good. You can't really take away the fishy smell of low quality matcha, unfortunately. I think to do this, you have to add a lot more milk. This formula, the 2 gram of matcha to 40 milliliters of milk, this is a relatively matcha forward formula because we wanted to test it that way, right? So I think do need to change it to a milk forward formula, and that's why that when you drink matcha lattes in cafes, quite often what happens was that they use low quality matcha, and then to compensate, they have to use um, a milk forward formula to reduce the presence of the matcha as much as possible. And that's why people say that, oh, this is just like drinking green milk. And that's kind of the objective, baby. Right? So let's add a little bit more milk. So it looks like this. Yeah. It's green milk and it's slightly sweetened. So it's all right. It tastes like milk, you know. And the smell of the milk wins out, so I don't think I can pick up any of the fishy notes. Yeah. So as a conclusion, as a matcha latte, for the low quality matcha, sugar doesn't really do it. You really need to have a milk forward formula in the first place. Shall we try it with a milk forward formula? Yeah, let's try that. Here we go again. All right. After this, I'm gonna drink a nice cup of sencha. I need something. I need something. Okay, so something I wasn't expecting, but this is the third experiment for the sweeteners. We will try the sweeteners based on a milk forward formula for the bad matcha, for the low quality matcha. So for this time, we're going to use 2 grams of matcha for 60 milliliters of milk. Previously it was 40. We've increased it by 1.5 times. And then we'll do just 3 levels, right, in terms of sweeteners. So this is level 1, 0 grams of sweeteners. Level 2 is 2 grams of sweeteners. And level 3 is 4 grams of sweeteners. Again, this is milk forward, so let's see which level of sweetener is good for a milk forward matcha latte with bad quality matcha. Okay, let's try with level 1 first. This is 0 grams of sweetener. Yeah, oof. Despite there being 50% more milk, it's still very harsh. You can still feel the astringency very strongly. You can still also feel the fishiness there as well. So I can't drink this a lot. This is quite bad. Okay, it continues to be bad even with milk forward. But let's try level 2. This is 2 grams of sugar. Yeah. You don't really taste the sweetness. Completely milk forward. Almost don't feel the matcha. I can slightly pick up the nasty notes. You know, you can pick up the nasty notes still. The sweetness doesn't stand out, but it does reduce the harshness a lot. and it does reduce the notes a lot, the nasty notes a lot. So it does help a lot. And I think that this makes it a lot closer to being drinkable. However, it's not pleasant by any stretch. So let's try 4 grams, level 3. From 4 grams, you can start to taste the sweetness. The astringency has really gone down to the extent where I think that part's not a problem. Just trying to see if there's any aftertaste. The nasty notes, does that linger? It's still there. It's still there, but I think a lot better, masked a lot. So out of these 3, I think this formula, level 3, is the best. I think you can increase it more. The sweetness, you can increase it more because this itself, the sweetness level is relatively moderate. How it feels is relatively moderate. So if you increase it more, I think it will mask the nastiness a little bit further. So, okay, so summarize for the low quality matcha, what happens is you can't really take a matcha forward approach to the latte. It has to be a milk forward approach for it to be anywhere close to drinkable, unfortunately. So that's the first part of this. And then the second part is in terms of sweetness, it is important. If you have no sweetness, it will be very harsh and astringent, and that's something you can't really drink. The notes are quite nasty as well. So as you increase the level of sugar, it does contain those weaknesses of the matcha quite well. And then we tried it with 2 grams and 4 grams. 4 grams was better. Also, in terms of the sweetness, it wasn't too sweet. So for me, that's my balance. But I think you can also increase to 6 grams and make it a little bit more sweeter, make it a sweet matcha latte. And that would, I think, mask even more the weakness. But right now, I think I had too much bad quality matcha lattes for a day. I don't think I can do any more experiments. I'll leave it at that for today. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. Again, if you're a cafe or a restaurant owner looking to add matcha or improve your matcha offering at your cafe, then we're here to help. You can register for our news letter, which is free from down below. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll be sharing useful information like this video on a regular basis. See you in the next video.